Ukrainian Air Force drove a Patriot missile system with several other vehicles very, very close to the front line and ambushed another A-50 plane and shot it down at a range of nearly 200 kilometers. And the Ukrainians were then able to take the antiquated S-200 anti-aircraft system and shoot down a second A-50. And after that, the Russians simply couldn't put up any more A-50s. They didn't want to lose them. They're very valuable aircraft. And so the Ukrainians have effectively denied Russia radar view over Ukraine from these airborne aircraft. So the A-50 is an equivalent to a NATO AWACS. It's basically a huge airborne radar which can see for hundreds of miles across territory and penetrate deep inside Ukraine. And the Russians have been using these, flying them over the Azov Sea in order to get a great picture of what's happening in Ukrainian airspace. That allowed them to monitor Ukrainian jet activity, but also, drones and any missiles that would be fired across the border at Russia or at Russian troops inside Ukrainian territory. And this was a huge advantage that the Russians had over the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians haven't had this kind of capability. And in fact, the Ukrainians were able to shoot down two A-50s in kind of surprise ambushes, which involved, in one case, taking a very old Soviet missile system that had been decommissioned 11 years earlier, kind of re-engineering it, rebuilding, finding all the components, getting people who were familiar with this really antiquated system, putting it back together, and mounting it some 40 kilometers from the front line in the knowing the patrol route of one of these A-50s across the Azov Sea. They fired it at this A-50. They missed it the first time, but they inspired it was a Ukrainian military intelligence it was a Ukrainian military intelligence operation, and they inspired the Ukrainian Air Force to then take up their own action. And the Ukrainian Air Force drove a Patriot missile system with several other vehicles very, very close to the front line and ambushed another A-50 plane and shot it down at a range of nearly 200 kilometers. And the Ukrainians were then able to take the antiquated S-200 anti-aircraft system and shoot down a second A-50. And after that, the Russians simply couldn't put up any more A-50s. They didn't want to lose them. They're very valuable aircraft. And so the Ukrainians have effectively denied Russia radar view over Ukraine from these airborne aircraft. And at the same time, Ukraine is going to be getting Swedish airborne radar systems to look into Russian airspace. So the situation when they get those aircraft will change quite dramatically.
And just how risky an operation was it for the Ukrainian forces involved to take down those A-50s?
So it's incredibly risky for the Patriot battery that had to drive very, very close to the front line. We're talking 5 or 6 kilometers within artillery range of the Russians. It had to be very covert, very secretive mission, had to be done quickly, drive in, ambush the plane and drive back out. And they'd been trained by the Germans, actually, who provided this Patriot battery on trucks in this kind of operation. On the other hand, the S-200 is a completely static air defense system, and that had to be built over a number of days and then deconstructed over a number of days. So again, they had to take very good care to camouflage that and then evacuate the area in case there was retaliation, and then start dismantling it later at night over a period of a few days, and up to 13 kilometers of cables on that system.
It seems incredibly audacious, but also ingenious. And you talking to the people involved in coming up with this plan? I mean, how did they view it? What did they tell you? Presumably incredibly proud, but a very tricky operation to actually carry out.
Yeah, I mean, they're obviously proud of what they've done, and the significance of it is huge in destroying two aircraft which are worth $330 million each to build. And Russia is really struggling to replace them. I think the idea is always, these ideas are born out of necessity. If you have to do something, you find a way to do it. And the Ukrainians have demonstrated great ingenuity throughout the course of this conflict of solving problems that are causing them great difficulties.
How much of a dent has it actually been then to Russia's ability to control the skies?
Well, I was talking to Air Marshal Greg Bagwell the other day, who was telling me that this was a massive blow to Russia, not only in terms of the war with Ukraine, but also its ability to confront NATO. These are quite old aircraft. They're very difficult to build. They have a lot of specialist crew that are needed. And, in both instances, they lost the crew of these aircraft. There's decades of experience on that plane that could be used to train others. And they only have a handful of them. I think there's supposed to be less than 9 of these functioning A50s. And he said that a lot of those will probably have already been cannibalized for spare parts. And the fact that Russia hasn't been able to put any more A50s up into the air may demonstrate that the others are not flight worthy.
One of the factors behind the success was the element of surprise, wasn't it? That those aircrew never imagined they were within range. Can you explain another tactic the Ukrainians have been using, the so-called SAMbush? What is it and how is it being used?
So this is the idea that you take an anti-aircraft defense system, which you would primarily expect to be used to defend an area against aircraft or missiles, and use it in an offensive capacity instead of a defensive capacity. And that involves kind of driving it or placing it towards where the object that you're trying to attack is, and attacking it from very long range. And only a few of the Ukrainian systems have the capability to do this. The S-200 has a very long range. It can shoot down aircraft at high altitude, but it's not very maneuverable. So you can only hit something big like an A-50 or a strategic bomber. They also shot down using the S-200 a Tu-22 M3 nuclear-capable strategic bomber, which again affects the confrontation with NATO and Russia's ability to deliver nuclear weapons if it needs to. And the Patriot system has a shorter range, and that really had to go a lot closer to the front lines. But it's about using these objects, which are usually used in air defense in an offensive capacity. And the Ukrainians have also done this in Bryansk in May of last year. They shot down a number of planes over the Bryansk region of Russia, and they've done it over Krinky as well. And that's helped a lot with some of the glide bomb attacks on Ukrainian positions. But obviously the numbers of glide bombs are so vast that they still don't have enough Patriot systems and enough air defense systems to move around. And that's why Zelensky is in Washington at the moment saying we need more of these systems.
But yeah, another example, though, of ingenious ways of coming up with things out of necessity.
Right. And it's something that the Americans were really surprised, because they don't use their Patriot systems in that way. They use them as a kind of area defense tool, and they defend strategic objects. But the Germans had at least envisaged using these in that way. Their Patriots are mounted on trucks and are much more mobile. So, and an American defense commander was saying, this is something we hadn't witnessed in kind of 22 years of my career as an air defense commander. But the Germans were drilling the Ukrainians to kind of wake up in the early hours of the night, march somewhere, drive their vehicles somewhere to go back, fight an air defense battle, and then return. So this kind of fight, shoot and scoot, as is known, is being applied across the Ukrainian forces, but very innovatively in air defense systems.
You've been watching Frontline for Times Radio with me, Kate Gerbeau. My thanks to our producers today, Louis Sykes and Morgan Burdick, and for you for watching. If you'd like to support us, you can subscribe now, or you can listen to Times Radio for the latest news and in-depth analysis, or go to thetimes.co.uk. For now, though, thanks for watching. Bye-bye.